All right, welcome back. Welcome to another episode of the Guys Telling Stories podcast. I'm Rich Douglas.
I'm Bill Easton.
And I'm Sean.
Hey,
Rich,
hey,
are you ready?
I'm ready, man. I'm ready. It's football season. Are you ready?
Oh, I'm ready. Are you ready for some football?
Oh, I know. I love football season. I love fantasy football. And we have a fantastic guest today, Christopher Harris, who we're going to talk to. And he kind of lives in that world. And he really knows his stuff. He's an expert.
Yes, he is.
But before we get to that, guys, just want to encourage you to follow us online. If you haven't been over to our Facebook page, give us a little like over there. We also have an amazing Twitter page, and we're on Instagram and Snapchat as well. So please take a moment to head on over to our pages and follow us on social media.
And as always, head over to guystellingstories.com. We got a lot to see, a lot to do, a lot to click on. One of the newest things we got going on, pretty exciting, it's Amazon Prime Music. Your music collection just got a lot bigger. Over 1 million Prime songs. Some great features include no interruptions, unlimited skips, no ads, really everything you want from a music library without any of the annoyances. So head over to guystellingstories.com, click the Amazon Prime Music banner, and get a free 30-day trial. Yeah,
it's free. If you don't like it, you cancel. It doesn't cost you a thing. And if you click on it, we get a cut of that.
Believe it or not, it actually comes with a free 30-day Amazon Prime membership. So you also get access to all Amazon Prime Video has to offer and free 2-day shipping on Amazon purchases.
Yeah, so check that out over on our website. And as always, too, when you shop on Amazon, think Guys Telling Stories first and click on our Amazon link.
Rich, I'm excited about my Try at Home. And by the way, for those of you that don't know, Try at Home is just simple products that we have purchased on Amazon and use in our daily, weekly, monthly lives.
Yeah, and if you want to check them out, we put up some cool videos, some memes, some pictures, and you can click on the Try at Home tab. And if you like what you see, we get a cut of that.
That's true. Rich, you got to go first.
Our guest today, Christopher Harris, he has a new novel coming out, War on Sound. And, writing a book is not an easy process. I was thinking maybe for my Try at Home, we could try to help him out, maybe get him on that Amazon bestseller list. So what we'll do is I'll put a link to Christopher Harris's book, War on Sound, and you can pre-order it, or if you're listening to this later, you can order it right from Amazon. And I think that's something that'd be kind of cool for fans of Christopher Harris and just people that like to read books.
So it's the future Try at Home.
Yeah, so head to our website, check out Try at Home, and click on the War on Sound tab for Christopher Harris's new book.
And when you're done with that, for your fantasy football draft, click on the remote-controlled fart machine.
What?
For those of you that do fantasy football drafts, there's always the guy that takes it way too seriously. It takes the full amount of time to make a pick, and the picks are ridiculous. This is perfect, because it at least makes everybody happy when you have this remote control fart machine. You just kind of duct tape it to the bottom of his seat, and as he moves around or gets up for picks, and you just make a little different noise.
Oh, this is great. Yeah, I bet you if you do it to that guy, Bill, at your fantasy draft, we're probably going to take him to like round 4 or 5 just to figure out.
I hope so.
Who it is and where it's coming from. Oh, I love it. That was a great Try at Home.
It's under $20, Rich. Why would you not spend that $20 on a remote control fart machine?
All right. Okay, let's get to our guest today, Christopher Harris. Bill, I gotta say, I'm a little nervous.
Oh, come on! He's just fantasy football. We get fantasy football talk with this guy.
This is one of our first podcaster interviews. Chris has his own Harris Football podcast, and I started listening to it about a year ago. He's a smart guy. He uses a lot of big words.
Big words get me in trouble. So at least you have a little advantage here.
Your
words are bigger.
I was an English major. I know big words, but he has a.
Come on, it's football. He'll be fine.
I hope so. One of the stories I'm hoping he can share with us too is about a year ago he left the worldwide leader of sports, ESPN, and he started his own fantasy football podcast and website, Harris Football, and then. I think hopefully we get into this too. He has a new podcast called the Juggernaut podcast, and that's more of like a cultural one where he's interviewing everybody from writers, film directors, musicians, and it's just there's so many stories to tell. I'm pretty excited to talk to him.
You okay? You gonna make it?
Yeah, I'll be okay. He just a little nervous.
You'll be fine.
All right, guys. Well, let's do this then. Let's give Chris a call. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on.
Cool. Great to have you.
All right, Chris. Well, hey, we always like to ask people, like, to bring us back to the beginning. Where are you originally from?
I'm from suburban Boston.
Okay.
So I'm about an hour and a half right now. I live about an hour and a half west of where I grew up. However, I've taken a circuitous route to come back to this to the Bay State.
Oh yeah, I hope we get into that because there's lots of stories to tell, I'm sure. But growing up, were your parents into? I guess obviously, probably not fantasy sports, but what was life like growing up?
Definitely sports focused. Like all families, there's always tension and conflict or whatever. But it always seemed like me and my sister and my two parents could always sort of gather around the television set and be into our sports teams. I have very fond memories of, Boston Celtic playoff games being a young kid, and somebody would decide that it would be bad luck if my sister moved to go to the bathroom, so she would have to sit there and hold it in until they didn't score on a possession or something. But pretty sports focused. And then, as a writer, so my mom was a buyer when I was a kid for a long departed bookstore chain. She bought all the paperback books for this regional chain in New England.
Oh, cool.
And as part of that job, she would get proof copies and advance copies of tons of novels. So I remember very elaborately like coming home and finding being psyched to look in the mail, and there would always be these wrapped in brown cardboard paper and sort of power stapled together. There would be these books, it'd be a new Philip Roth novel or a new Saul Bellow novel or a new, whatever.
Yeah.
And a lot of bad ones too. But, I just fell in love with books that way, I think.
Some of those books are proof copies, especially, are worth a good amount of money if they went big or sold a lot. If those are still around.
I think they're gone. I think long since gone. They probably didn't make it past like my graduating high school.
Pawn Stars. I watch a lot of Pawn Stars.
Yeah.
So it's...
for me, when I was sitting around with the family, with some of those earlier sports memories, I remember specifically we're recording out of Buffalo, New York, and the Bills were going to their first Super Bowl, very, very famous or infamous Super Bowl.
You were alive?
I was alive, yeah. Well, my family got a VCR for Christmas, so I was in charge of recording the game, and I didn't know about, and you probably remember this, Chris, the different like recording speeds you could press. So it was like a 2-hour film, a 4-hour film, a 6-hour film. You could record, different quality. I don't know. I was a kid, and I remember trying to record the Super Bowl and it taking about 8 different VCR tapes. And my dad kept yelling at me, going, "What are you doing wrong? Just press record, stick the tape in." And by the end of the game, he didn't care whether we had it taped or not, with wide right and everything. But it was definitely one of those sports memories growing up. What about you, Bill? Did you was it football for you? Was there a particular sport that you recall?
I'll do the same Super Bowl game. I was at a local community college studying school, and they had a big screen TV that we had access to. And we're underage, so we were trying to do something a little bit different. So we took the big screen to Subway and set it up. And we became friends with the guy over the years before. And he goes, "Yeah, I got no way to watch the game. If you guys bring in a TV, you guys eat for free during the game." So I brought this giant big screen over, and we set it up at Subway and brought in wine coolers. It was great.
What a cool memory. Again, I wish the game would have turned out different.
Is Chris here? Did we lose Chris?
No, you're still here, Chris. Yeah,
I am. I'm here.
Did you play football?
I did in high school for a little bit, and then it wasn't really my crowd. I wound up playing tennis throughout high school. That was much more my crowd. Played a little bit of basketball, like was on the freshman team of basketball, was on a couple years worth of football, but I like the game, and I didn't so much like the people who played the game.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of knuckleheads. So I felt like I sort of found my people with the tennis team, and so I played that throughout, all the way through.
Decent tennis player?
Yeah, I think I was okay. I think I was pretty good. And we were good. I think we made like semifinals of states one year, my senior year, and then I went off to school and discovered hockey and became a hockey goalie all through college.
Oh wow, good for you.
Yeah,
a goalie. How do you just become a goalie? Like there's
Well, I mean,
flexibility and
I'm a pretty good athlete, but
Okay.
I think mostly though it was Cornell, so I know a little bit about upstate New York,
yeah.
and very, very good PE there, very good physical education programs. You can find almost anything, and they have like, as long as you take 2 semesters of PE or I don't know at the time, then it could be pretty much whatever you wanted. Like I took rec golf. As long as you played like 9 holes of golf on the university golf course, like 10 times in a semester, you're good. You passed.
That's awesome.
And they had hockey, and so I remember just one day going in the first day of rec hockey for a class, and they had the old goalie pads sitting there, and everyone was like, "Well, we need 2 goalies, or we can't have a class." And eventually, I was like, "All right, well," and it turned out I was pretty good at it.
Good.
Moving ahead a little bit in time, kind of take us back to college a little bit. What's your background there in terms of journalism, fantasy sports, writing, a little bit of everything?
So let's see. I mean, I played fantasy sports all through probably junior high and high school, certainly at least high school. And we played. It was a good way to stay in touch. So I played throughout. I've played forever. There wasn't such a thing as a person who did that for a living. So
Absolutely
no, of course,
not.
I
Yeah.
wasn't thinking about that. I have no journalism background. I do not proclaim to have a journalism background. The typical reporter tasks, the things that reporters have to do, make me sick. I would never ever want to have to talk to athletes for a living. Here goes. I don't necessarily have intrinsic contempt for athletes at all. I think they're just sort of not that interesting as intellectual creatures. I've definitely at my time I had ESPN for 8 years. I certainly met some who I felt otherwise about, but mostly I did not.
Yeah, the majority.
And so having to like suck up to them and to get the good quotes, to be their pal, that just feels like the worst thing in the world. And I'm much more a sort of go off on my own and write a lot of stuff in a closet somewhere, secretly. Write a novel when no one's looking kind of guy. So I always wanted to be a fiction writer. I didn't have the courage of my convictions to study that undergraduate. I was a economics and political science major.
Okay.
And I wound up getting an MBA like 1 year out of school, and then I went back to the University of Texas and got an MBA. Obviously not exactly being true to my wishes to be a fiction writer. I'm writing literary fiction. I'm not going to make a living at it. At least not a living that I want to make, where I can actually eat food and stuff. So it's all well and good. I'm not sad that I wasn't an English major, even though I feel like I've made up for it by reading a lot since then, and kind of being fairly well versed and a pretty good writer. But I certainly was more of a generalist than a specificist, I guess.
So Texas, I'm going to Texas for a football game this fall for the first time.
Yeah, it's fun.
Ever. I went to West Virginia, so I'm going on a road trip, and I'm pretty psyched about it. West Virginia has been a pretty decent, I would say a B average football team for the last 20 or 30 years. They've never really peaked anywhere. Special had a chance to go to a national championship, but lost the backyard brawl to Pitt Thanksgiving weekend to knock us out of that. And the road trips have been like Cincinnati and Syracuse and Rutgers, and so I'm pretty excited for this. I've been to a big away games for neutral sites, like bowl games and things, but this is like a really true road game. I'm assuming you've been to Texas football games, home games for you when you were down there.
I have, yeah. I lived in Austin for 5 years, 2 of it for business school, and then 3 after. Yeah, big UT fan. I spend time in Austin when I can. I still have probably my best friends in the world live in Austin. And I, love UT sports, and went to basketball games this winter. It was the first Shaka year. That was fun. The football games are something else. It's a lot of people, and there are a lot of burnt orange, and pretty fun. Hopefully you go on a day that's not like blisteringly hot, because it can be really hot.
It's mid-November, so hopefully,
like I said, hopefully you go
down. Yeah.
Like I said, hopefully you go on a day that isn't blisteringly hot. It probably won't be, but who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. It's fun.
Well, Chris, you mentioned you have like a long story in terms of getting to where you're at today. I can't wait to get to talking about Harris football. But some of the guests we have on the show are in the startup world, entrepreneurs. Did I hear you had a little experience with that before your time at ESPN?
I did. Right out of business school, my buddy Doug and I started a company that did a few different things. sort of like web related stuff. And, this is nascency of the web. And I would say, we gave it a good college try, but I know he was a little bit older than I, and he, I'm sure, rolled his eyes at me constantly because I was, young and full of piss and vinegar. But, we made a living for a few years, but I wouldn't say we were a big old success. And basically, after the end of that 5 years, I got to the point where I couldn't handle the heat in Texas anymore, and that was where he was going to be. And so, no, I went back to Massachusetts. I couldn't do it. And then I wound up working for some small companies. I was a creative director for a small ad agency. I was number 3, like a producer at a web.com startup kind of thing. So definitely had boards of director that I had to give reports to, and clients that I had to schmooze and make sure we're happy, and definitely have done the small business thing before. And when I basically I never really intended to leave small business. Mostly I just decided that I never wanted to have a real job ever again.
What's that interesting? Hopefully there's an interesting like courting process to get you to a job like ESPN, like how do you go from being back in Massachusetts to working for the worldwide leader of sports?
Yeah, so okay, then I went back to school again. Basically, the point at which I decided no more real jobs for me, I went back to school again, and this was for an MFA in creative writing, in fiction writing. Oh, so nice. I'm one of those very common dual threat MBAs, MFA in creative writing.
Not another one.
I know. Finally feeling as though, I always knew I wanted to be a fiction writer. What the heck? I don't really like real jobs. University of Massachusetts will pay me to go to school. Pay me via a teaching assistantship. It's a slave wage, but at least it's money, right?
Right.
And so I did that. I went back to school, and I figured it beats working, and I'll figure something out. And it was really, it was the moment of my life that I feel like was the biggest leap of faith that I've ever really made, where it was scary as hell, and I felt like it was kind of objectively stupid, but how bad could things really get? Thank heavens, I have a great family support structure. I have wonderful parents. If things ever got so bad, I could rely on them to like save me from starvation. And so,
awesome.
Okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go back to school. So I did. I went back to school, had a very, very good experience. Of course, the whole time, there's a saying in the MFA world that they call it a terminal degree for a reason. Which is that there's really nowhere to go from there. And so I was finishing up, and I had written a collection of short stories for my thesis and was lucky enough to get a few of those published. Great. But again, you're not making any money doing any of that. And I'd had some freelance stuff bought on the web and in print, and great. But again, you're not making real money doing that. And Matthew Berry had left Roto World and started his own thing called TalentedMrRoto.com.
Okay,
and they had a contest to become one of their writers. And the prize of this contest was, congratulations, we'll pay you no money and you can do work for us for nothing.
It sounds like an awesome contest, not so great.
Wait, how do we do this? Because I want to start this.
Right, well, it's fine, but it was definitely their way. They're a little startup. They're not really making any money,
True.
But they're interested in basically having more content. And I won this contest just by submitting some spec articles. I'd literally never written a word about fantasy football, but clearly had been writing all my life. And, just to take a little detour, like I get so many emails from people about how do I get where you are, or how do I become a writer and all that stuff. And it feels like the biggest cliche in the world, but you have to get 1,000 pages of bad writing under your odometer. You can't just snap your fingers. You have to read everything, and you have to write so much. And I will say, this happened like 2006 or 7 or something like that, and obviously that was awesome timing. Extraordinarily lucky,
right,
to have had this happen right at the moment that the fantasy world was going boom, right?
Yeah.
But I do feel like luck is the residue of design in a small way, in that I was ready because I had been writing. I mean, I had written a lot of bad stuff. I'd written novels that I look back on now that are terrible and I never did anything with. I'd written tons of short fiction. I'd written tons of nonfiction short pieces. And so I was at least ready to write a good piece when I went to win that contest. And So I wound up being a writer for them for probably about 6 months. Yahoo saw my stuff there, and they hired me to do the same thing for them, except they'll pay me.
Nice.
That was good.
Finally, high five, right?
Right. And then Barry left to go to ESPN, and he said, hey, if you can get out of Yahoo, we'll pay you more money and we'll put you on TV. And I was like, I mean, okay, cool.
Sure.
So there you had it, and that's how I wound up getting in. I don't know if that's a good enough story, but
Oh, no,
No,
it's
there's no
such a
bad
cool
stories.
story because I'm thinking of, even me, like right now, I don't know if I would want to be on TV,
I would need to lose about 20, 25 pounds.
fortunately, I am an incredible specimen of masculinity, so we're good.
We have a picture of you here, and it's funny. When we do this, we normally record, we'll go somewhere, we'll record in a bar, and we'll sit down with whoever we're meeting with, and we'll drive a ways to do it. Obviously, you're a little further. So we we have a picture, and I believe it's from one of your websites, and it's just the reason I asked you if you were a football player in the beginning is because it's like a half-hearted smile, but I'm going to kill you smile. And there's these like lines in the side of your forehead that also speak, I'm going to kill you. But you're dressed well, and it's not a bad picture. I'm not trying to make fun of the picture. It's just you look very serious and
I am. I'm an extraordinarily serious person.
okay. So that's that's the picture. So we do have a picture of you. So I'm looking at it now, and I'm just like, yeah.
Anybody listening, I'm out there. I'm on the public record.
Okay.
Well, Chris, I think most people probably are going to recognize you from your time at ESPN, almost a decade, and then you transition away from that to start something brand new, your own Harris Football. And I think, hearing just about the first couple steps with that, I mean, it seemed to happen so fast because you were writing stories less than a year ago that I was reading, for fantasy football on ESPN. And then all of a sudden I hear there's a new podcast and I download it, and it's not just, once a week or, you're just trying this thing out. It seemed like you hit it with a full head of steam in the sense like pedal to the metal. Was there a story about transitioning away from ESPN to create Harris Football?
Oh yeah, it's a good story. I mean, it's a happy story in that I think everybody likes everybody, so there's no ill will or anything. Talent contracts at any network like that are of a certain fixed length, right? And so you're on a 3-year deal, or you're on a 1-year deal, or a 2-year deal. So my deal was up last July, which the reason, it's terrible timing for a football writer to have your contract. Actually, it was early in August. It was early in August that the contract ended, right? Which is terrible timing for a football writer. But the reason that had happened is that I had been courted by the NFL Network a few years before, and ESPN had to keep me had redone my deal. So it was right. That had happened right in August. So that was when these things are a year long. So it just so happened, kind of unfortunately for both parties, we were going to have to do this negotiation. We have to figure everything out in August. And the truth is that last year at ESPN, while they're really good to me, and I have a lot of friends there, and especially everybody on the digital side, just really nice and professional and cool and understanding. And I really do like the group very much. I was burned out on them. I feel like they probably sensed it too. And, I felt like as we were talking, and they made an offer, and listen, it's stupid money. It's too much money to do this for a living, right? What they were offering. The idea that I turned it down is ludicrous and makes a lot of people mad.
Right.
Are you insane? And I did wind up turning it down though. And I had a conversation with my editor, and he was like, can I get you more money? Like, we had negotiated this, right? And he said, okay, but I want you to stay, so can I get you more money? And I was like, no, honestly, it's not really about that. I felt stagnated. I felt like every season was sort of Groundhog's Day. You were kind of doing the same tasks every single year, and nothing was really changing much. And so it didn't become like, it became, what the hell am I going to do?
Yeah, but like pretty quickly, because like you said, it's the worst possible timing. If you wanted to, like most people, take a couple of months off, get your affairs in order, maybe go travel a little bit, you missed this whole season. So instead, I get a little notification that you have this brand new brand going immediately. So for the people that are familiar with that, your fan support is off the charts in terms of the Kickstarter program, which I'm sure we'll get to soon. But was there a couple of events that little like ducks in a row you had to get done within a 2-week time period? I'm sure there were. A website for one, right?
Right. But I I will say, I hung up the phone with ESPN, having said I'm not coming back, and I did not think, oh, good, here comes my chance to build my empire on my own. Right? What I said was, I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. However, I do have all of this 2015 football knowledge in my head because I'd written their preview magazine and I'd written a lot of the columns that you were talking about. Like I had it all in my noggin, the way I always would entering any football season. And one frustration at ESPN was I was just never going to get to do a daily podcast. I had a podcast there that was 2 days a week, and it was fun, but it wasn't enough. And the fans were regularly saying, this isn't enough. You know, the show just isn't long enough to say everything that you need to say, and it's not the format that you want. And, you know, so what I decided was, all right, I have all this knowledge in my head and I had in the back of my mind. It was a bummer that I'd never gotten to do a daily podcast. And I said, all right, well, what else am I going to do? I might as well start this show and just see what happens. And then by January, I'll figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. Because why waste what's in my head, right? Why waste the...
Yeah, good attitude.
But
Yeah.
you could have been one of the guys on the FanDuel commercials with the big checks.
I could have.
Just play FanDuel, yeah.
So then, you know, yes, there were, as soon as I made that decision, there were so many ducks to get in a row. It was, you know, I got help on a website. I got help from my buddy Bill Childs, who's amazing. He helped me with learning all the stuff about the production, because I never did any production on a podcast. I just was hooked on it. You know, I was a microphone and I talked into it and my voice went somewhere and I didn't pay attention to where.
Right.
And other people who I'm forgetting. You know, I got tons of support from friends, and you know, fortunately had this big Twitter following from ESPN. It was, you know, whatever, 100,000 followers. And I made a first show and I put it out there. And, you know, the only way it was ever going to work was going to be as a daily podcast. I knew that, like, because that was the thing that I had not done previously. I didn't know how to get ads. Honestly, so much needed to be lined up. So many ducks. It was a gaggle of ducks. That's awesome. What's the group of ducks? Herd.
Gander, right?
Plethora.
Plethora.
No, it's three amigos.
I get asked the 100-sized duck questions a lot, by the way, on Twitter. A lot of people. So yeah, I mean, I did it all, and you know, essentially what it was, like, I thought, okay, I'm going to be doing this show every day for 4 months or 5 months. And my nightmare was, you know, November 23rd would come around and 837 people are listening to the show. So it's been a failure, but that's okay. But I was, you know, I was prepared to be doing something else in January, but at least, you know, I was going to have to do the show for the last 6 weeks of the season, knowing it wasn't going anywhere. And what a bummer that was going to be.
You're right,
and
yeah.
I had lots of anxiety about that. And instead, I mean, it went crazy right away. I mean, it went crazy. You know, I was talking with an ad broker and they were like, well, listen, if you get to this level of listens, that's when we can start selling your ads, because people, you know, that companies want a certain number of impressions or else it's not worth their while. And, you know, within a week, they were like, okay, so we're bumping up the impressions to 30,000 a show. And suddenly it became real money, and suddenly it became, it's absolutely crazy that this happened. And I'm so grateful. Like you said, the fan base, I mean, turned out to be the MVPs in this whole situation.
Oh, absolutely. For those who aren't familiar with Chris and his fans, he has run a successful Kickstarter campaign recently. They make mixtape tribute songs that they send into him, create fan-created Twitter accounts, then tweet as objects, ideas, concepts.
They must have the same picture we do.
When you describe it, it doesn't sound that sane. It doesn't really sound that sane when you describe it like in the abstract, but it's actually really fun.
Well, yeah, because, you know, you want that feedback for someone to go after his dream or to go after something with the idea of, let's see how this goes, and to have it blow up. One of the ways it blows up, of course, is maybe you can support yourself financially, but even if you were getting this fan response and the money wasn't rolling in, I'm sure you would have considered maybe still doing something like this, because it's independent, it's yours, you own it, and that's something similar to your writing, basically, that you could kind of have ownership and celebrate for years to come. I mean, it's a really cool thing that you have going, and it's less than a year old, and
right. And certainly I 100% agree that of all the benefits that I'm getting out of this past year, finance is great, but it's not the primary. I totally agree.
Yeah. One of the things we can touch on too is you're, an accomplished author. It's not easy to get a book written, let alone published or distribute. I know you have a couple already on the shelf, and you have a new one coming. Is there anything you want to talk about in terms of that new book coming out?
It's called War on Sound, and it's my big important novel about the death of rock. It's about a band, basically kind of a contemporary to us right now, rock band of much younger people than myself, who still have rock dreams and who are finding a world that no longer exactly endorses or supports rock dreams. That is not the style of music that is in vogue, and not making anybody any money anymore, really, unless you're the Foo Fighters. So it's a story about this band, basically, and I think it's fun, but it's also a lament about kind of where we are in terms of music. It's not my favorite time for music ever.
So it seems like a lot of the stuff that you've done, especially recently, you have been pretty successful. Was there any failures along the way that you want to mention, or anything that happened that was discouraging you to get to this point?
I mean, I would say from a late career, where I am in my career now for the last decade or whatever, since MFA school, it's been amazingly failure free and amazing, and I'm so lucky. Like, I recognize that good fortune in terms of timing. Like, listen, I get it. I'm not going to be the one who says, no, this is because of I pulled myself up on my bootstraps. There's probably some of that, but a lot of it is just right place, right time, right opportunity. And that has been awesome. Early in my 20s, definitely, like, our startup out of business school was, I wouldn't say if we learned a lot, but we didn't really make enough money to be grown-ups. It was sort of like, we did okay, and the thing that I have the thickest skin from, and I'll probably say the thinnest skin from, because it's not any thicker than it used to be, is the fiction world is awful. If there's any fiction writers who are listening, like, I feel your pain. It's awful. And like getting especially for writing literary fiction, it's all you hear is rejection. All you hear is no. The publishing industry just changed after the financial crisis, and there are no more deals for literary fiction unless you have, a giant following. And I have a giant following for something else, and even that really doesn't get me in the door. I have friends who are editors at Random House, who are at the big publishers, and they like my work, and they are psyched when they get my books, but they ain't buying them because they just know they have international, multinational overlords who look at the bottom line and they say, why are you wasting your time on this book that's going to sell 5,000 copies? Like, that's not what we need. Whereas previously, I'm pining for the old days, but there's a lot of parallels between trying to be a rock musician now and trying to be a literary novelist now, because there were previous days where all you needed was a guitar and a song and a dream, and you could legitimately lay claim to maybe making $1 million. Similarly with a literary novel, if you hit it at the right place at the right time, you could sell a lot of copies. It's just not going to happen.
So spell check's kind of like auto-tune.
Yeah, maybe if we're going to, let's torture a metaphor. Let's torture some metaphor.
Yeah, I looked at Bill. I was like, I think that's deep, but I'm not sure if that's deep.
But that's where my failures. I wouldn't even say failures. I mean, I think in the last decade or so, I think I've written some really good stuff, and I've had a lot of fans tell me they like the books that I write, but it's never going to be. It's funny. Philip Roth writing Portnoy's Complaint and becoming literally a star, a media star, somebody who is on the cover of Time magazine, somebody who is recognized on the street, novelist being recognized on the street. Like, that deal's gone, man.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist anymore. I mean, fine, J.K. Rowling, yes, and I'm not trying to say anything bad about Harry Potter, but that's in my mind that's not what I aspire to, and like sort of the literary novelist probably aspires to something beyond that, and that just really doesn't exist anymore. And it's a hard lesson to learn, and you need to learn to do it because you love it and not because there's a ton of gain.
Yeah, that's good advice. Looking, kind of transitioning back to Harris football a little bit, is there anything on the horizon that's currently exciting you? Do you have a vision for yourself in the future for this upcoming, fantasy football season?
And give a whole, like, general, what is it? Like, to let everyone know exactly what Harris football is so they can go check it out.
Yeah, well, harrisfootball.com is the place where the podcasts live. And the idea of the podcast, the animating force behind it is to get, to help you win your fantasy league. That's really the bottom line. I think my approach to fantasy football tends to be pretty different from what you mostly hear. I watch all the games. So I watch film, and I don't really believe in listening to what the coaches or the athletes say, because I think we've reached a crossover point in sports culture now where essentially those people are politicians, and you don't believe anything politicians say, right? So don't believe anything these people say. There's a lot of misinformation. Similarly, I think there's a lot of bad analysis about the NFL that comes from stats. You can find stats in the NFL to say anything you want to reinforce whatever point you want to make. I tend to call them crutch arguments. Basically, I have this argument that I'd like to make. Can you give me a ready-made, smart-sounding fact that backs it up? And I feel like that's most of the analysis you get in the fantasy space and really in the NFL space. Whereas in baseball, numbers tell us a ton because the interactions tend to be very simple. One pitcher, one batter, very similar rules. It's not a lot of variables. The NFL is great. Football is just an 11-on-11 sport. Every single play is not replicable. A running back playing poorly isn't always the running back's fault, but sometimes it is. And that's where putting in the time and really it's a lot of work to watch all that film, but I feel like that informs what I talk about on the show, and hopefully people are sort of getting to cut through a lot of the nonsense.
Does this new focus on analytics and comparing that to general stats, does that help or hinder that argument? Because obviously anything can happen on any play in football.
Right.
This guy would have been tackled if this guy didn't step on a golf ball that was thrown out from the crowd. And how do you,
right.
There's an 80-yard run, so the stats would show that he averaged 7.3 a carry instead of 2.4.
Yeah, I mean that is for sure. Yards per carry that's my bet noir. That's the one I hate the most. The fact is that there's no predicting the future in any sport on a play-by-play or even a game-by-game basis, right? That's just all we're trying to come up with is what are the best predictors. And the fact is, I really don't believe there are very many analytics in the NFL. I think what we're calling analytics aren't the same equivalent as analytics in baseball, just because the game is just so much more complicated and so much different. Mm-hmm. You guys know Pro Football Focus.
Yes.
And they do the thing where they say, okay, Darrelle Revis this year was the 35th best corner by our metrics. And that makes it sound very smart and scientific, and like we did some analytics here. You know what it is? It's somebody sitting there watching the film, watching Darrelle Revis on every play and grading him positively or negatively on that play. Sounds pretty subjective to me. It sounds kind of like what I do. I admire the heck out of Pro Football Focus. Turning it into a number for me, I guess it's a way to sell a business. It's a business that's doing really well, and
yes, it is. Yeah.
But I don't feel like it's actually, those numbers don't actually mean all that much. All they mean is that the person watching the film had a good experience watching that particular player. And by the way, it's not the same person watching every player. It's a whole bunch of different film watchers. And so what if somebody else has different standards? And listen, I'm not trying to poke a hole in their methodology. In fact, in the end, I think we share that methodology where you got to lay eyes on it. You're not going to really know in football until you see it, because a box score can mean a million different things. And a dumb kludgy divided by stat, yards per attempt, yards per, like you just implied, one play can change someone's yards per carry by a yard, and they suddenly look like a great player. And so for me, I don't think what I do is necessarily incongruous with what we would call analytics. I just don't think there really are analytics that are reliable in football the way there definitely are in baseball. I totally believe in batting average on balls in play. Absolutely, I believe in that. That's a real thing, and that's very useful for analysis. I believe in OPS. Absolutely. I just don't really find it persuasive that there are hard and fast, or at least not very many hard and fast numbers that tell us such things in the NFL.
It sounds like you know your stuff, and obviously you've been doing this for a long, long time. And I think that's why people have been tuning in and showing you the support that you have, because you sort of take not necessarily a contrarian point of view or just a different point of view, but you have your own, perspective on these types of things. And, I think you've been pretty successful with it. And I know I've been listening since last summer, and I've enjoyed kind of the daily show.
Rich, did you win your fantasy league?
I did.
There you go. That's it.
I did. It was
it.
It was the first year in 6 years. And
well, to be fair, I don't want the blame when you lose,
No,
so I'm not going to take the credit that you won. You win. You get the credit.
Chris, I lost. I did not listen. So there you go. Rich listened. He won.
This year you're going to tie.
We're not even in the same league, so we both could have won.
Again, looking ahead, is there anything that fans or listeners can be excited about? A vision you have for yourself in the near future?
Yeah, well, you mentioned the Kickstarter, and that's now over as of the time when people are listening to this. But
Yes.
what it came down to was for many years at ESPN, they put out a fantasy football preview print magazine. And that's the thing that people buy on the newsstand and carry with them to their draft. And they go down the list and they go, oh, look, or, they read it on the toilet, right?
Study.
Yeah, let's be real here. Yep.
Right. And I wrote all the player profiles for those magazines for many, many years. And obviously this year was like the shackles were off. I didn't have to write it. It was so nice. And one frustration really with the process was that the magazine people just decided this thing's coming out in June. So you got to be done with it in early May. Mm-hmm. And so you got to write a magazine previewing what's going to happen September 7th in early May. And it was always maddening. I mean, there was one year where Aaron Hernandez had a big old picture, his big old photograph in that magazine. And of course, that summer, bad things happened.
Yes.
So like it was annoying. And so this time around, just having gone through the NFL draft and not having to do that was so freaking liberating. However, I said, I was in Austin, and I was, I normally live in a pretty small town, and especially like Western Mass doesn't tend to be all that sports oriented. So it's not like I ever get recognized or anything like that. But when I'm in Austin, it happens all the time. I'll be at a bar and people go, hey, are you, it'll happen once a week, twice a week, something like that, which is great. And obviously the main reason I do this for a living clearly is that.
Free drinks.
So we did a tweet up. So anybody who was in Austin, I tweeted, I said, or Facebook, I mentioned on the show, like, let's do a tweet up. Anybody who wants to meet in person, let's do it. I'd like to say thank you in person for listening and blah. So we had like 30 people show up. It was really fun. And in the course of the conversation, I said, yeah, I used to write profiles, but I don't do that anymore. I might do it as part of the business, but it's a lot of work. And the idea of putting in all that work and then finding out that 12 people want to buy it would be a huge bummer. And Tom Morgan, one of the guys there, I'm giving you a shout out, Tom, said, why don't you do a Kickstarter? You can essentially use it as a pre-order. If it funds, if you reach your goal, that will, whatever minimum amount of money you need to make it worth your while to do the work. Great. And then come fall, you'll sell, come summer, you'll sell more copies too. Like you'll have, once you've exceeded the Kickstarter. So basically we funded like in 2 weeks. It was great. It'll be electronic only. So it'll be digital PDF, and it'll sell just like that magazine sold, except for it'll be a digital version. And it'll be a lot of snark and a pure unadulterated me. And people can go to harrisfootball.com and find out how to buy it.
Are you going to have an update on Aaron Hernandez?
I probably am not. I think we can close the book on that story.
Use the same picture, just put bars in front of it.
Yeah, well, that's one thing. It's not being ESPN. I'm not going to have too many player photos in there, but I feel like that kind of goes along with my sense that essentially they're meat that we root for. So I don't really need to see the pictures of the meat. Go ahead. You guys go run around. We don't need to see your picture.
Oh, man. Well, Chris, this has been great. We always like to end with final thoughts or any advice. I know you sort of brought it up earlier. If the guy's meeting you in a bar in Austin saying, how can I get into this sort of career, or just somebody that maybe wants to do a podcast on whatever they're passionate about, any advice you'd give to somebody who hasn't even started yet but wants to start?
Yeah, I do get that email a lot. I would say I recognize and fully endorse the idea that I was lucky. But like I said, I was ready and I had written a whole bunch. And not only that, but when I got a break, even if it was a small little company who wasn't going to pay me any money, I was willing to say yes. I was willing to figure out a way to do it. They weren't going to pay me money, but I was going to write and prove that I could do it to a wider audience. And that's how all this happened. And so I would say my advice, any kind of writing, not just fantasy writing, is do it, You should. I'll put it this way: it's hard to be a writer in this world. If you can do something else, go ahead and do it. I can't. I can't not write fiction. I would love to not write fiction. Writing fiction is really hard and tends to, isolate you in your room by yourself for hours and hours and hours, and you don't see people, and you sacrifice a lot to be a writer. But if you are one of those people who can't not do it, do it. Don't ever stop. Just keep going. You're going to stink at first, and you're going to think it's great, and then 5 years later, you look back and you realize you weren't very good. But you have to get pages on your odometer. And then I would say similarly with a podcast, the barriers to entry are exactly zero. You know what I mean? You guys started a show. You didn't have a giant Twitter following. I started from the upper middle class of podcasting. Let's face it. I had a huge Twitter following. You guys were like, this is going to be fun. Maybe we're not going to make $1 million doing it, but we're going to see how it goes and get better at it.
We will, Chris. Give us 240 years. We'll be there.
Yeah.
Would you guys not agree though that that the podcasts that you're cranking out now are better than the ones that you did at the very beginning?
Definitely.
Absolutely, yeah. There was that barrier where you were basically afraid to try, and not because you were going to fail, but you always know that first, page, that first story, that first episode isn't going to probably be that great. And,
Oh, you heard it.
But, no, I didn't, but it is just by the nature of the beast, right? It is, yeah.
But like you mentioned, you have a support system in place. Maybe it's family and it's friends, and, it can even just be some online followers, people you are Facebook friends with. And, they show you that love and support to kind of keep it going a little bit. And I think one of the benefits for us is to record in these seasons. We had a little bit of downtime, kind of like a hiatus, and then we can reflect on how we want to make it better. And yeah, most definitely. I think the quality's gone up, and the risks we're willing to take too. Just asking you different questions that we've never asked anybody before, just to kind of see, what's this guy's story. And and I honestly, I really enjoyed hearing it, and I think our listeners and yours as well, if they tune in, they're gonna enjoy it too.
Yeah. And so that's my response is be doing it. Just be doing it and find out if you like doing it, and you will by the nature. Not, I'm talking about prospective people who haven't done it yet. Be doing it. Just go ahead. You know what? It is, you can get a USB mic for $60 and you need your computer and you got a podcast. That's it. The software is free. Go is my thing. So I am actually starting a second podcast. And again, I recognize I am starting from the upper middle class of podcasts.
I think you're above that now. You are starting a lot higher than upper middle.
Right. I might be. Yeah. Now I'm starting from the deluxe apartment in the sky. I guess. But this one is not going to be football though, so it's going to be much more of a passion project. It's going to be kind of an arts. People can find it at juggernautpod.com. It's going to be called The Juggernaut, and it's going to be arts. It's going to be about books and movies and TV and music, and going to basically an interview show. Going to talk to people either about their art, about their songs, about their books or whatever, or people who are enthusiastic about an artist of some kind. And that's probably not going to make $1 million, but I know what I'm doing technically, and I know what I'm doing on the air. And my thing is it's been an idea, and it's been something, since I talk a lot about that stuff on the football show, that a lot of listeners have said, I would love to hear you do movie reviews. I would love to hear you talk about your favorite books or whatever. And rather than stew in my juices and say, yeah, that would be interesting, I wonder if I could ever make that a thing, I finally just decided, why don't I just make that a thing, and we'll just go from there. It would be fun to try, and then we'll see. And I recognize my situation right now isn't the same as everybody else's, but I do think there's something to that. And you guys are living proof. You're walking the walk too. It's always going to be more possible to happen and to break big if you actually do it, right? As opposed to sort of just sit around and wish someone would give you the chance.
Yeah, no, you gotta pursue all avenues. I know it's interesting that you're trying a new, genre, and you can set up a schedule. I'm guessing that'll work for you with a show like The Juggernaut. You could record weekly if you wanted to, and
right.
And that could fit.
It'll
better
be much more like that's right. It'll be much more like weekly or twice a week or something like that. Which, by its very nature, as you guys just know from the podcasting business, you're only going to make money if you have a lot of downloads, and you're only going to get a lot of downloads if you're cranking out a lot of shows, right? And so if you're only putting out intermediate shows, well, this is much more just for fun, right? But still, who knows where things go? Like you said,
right.
you have grand designs on getting a bigger audience and getting bigger and better guests, and I would feel the same about my new thing. And I'm a big believer in just doing it. We live in a world now, for all my lamenting about the death of rock and the death of literary fiction, there certainly isn't the death of entrepreneurial opportunity, right? The barriers to entry are just so low.
No, not at all. One of our last guests, our last guest of season 1, it was executive director of a startup program here. They call it the Earth's largest. They give out $5 million. So all you need is a business plan and a dream, and like you're kind of saying, the willingness to actually try. So it'd be so interesting to see where you're at in another year. You know what I mean? Because you're coming up on your 1-year anniversary of starting, Harris football. So. I look forward to sort of checking back in with you and seeing where things are at and how you're doing.
Awesome, guys. It was really a pleasure. Of course, if I could talk about myself for an hour, good Lord. I mean, I'm there. So,
Well, we always we'll plug it up front with an intro, but can you tell people where to find you online?
of course, it's at Harris Football is everywhere, basically. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, it's all Harris Football. We'll also have a Twitter account, Juggernaut Pod, for the other podcast. Hopefully we'll get some folks excited about that project too. If you want to hit me up via email, heyharris@harrisfootball.com.
Chris, thanks again for sharing all your stories with us. This has been a fantastic episode of Guys Telling Stories. Chris, thanks again for doing the show.
Thank you for having me very much. Really fun.
All right, I'm Rich Douglas.
I'm Bill Easton.
All right, guys, we'll see you next time. Okay, Christopher Harris.
Sweet.
Yeah, I feel good. I feel better. I was a little worried in the beginning, but I think that was pretty successful.
Good.
Yeah. I loved hearing about his new podcast, actually.
That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, he was the first podcaster we're kind of talking to that does this sort of thing full time, and he has a second one coming out, The Juggernaut.
We should talk to more podcasters.
Yeah, you know what, and he's a really smart guy. I was right. He did use some big words. And I don't know what you call a group of ducks.
Sean's waving over here.
I was trying to mouth it to you guys from behind the glass. A group of ducks. There's variations. When they're in the air in flight, it's a flock of ducks. When they're paddling down, a river or stream, it's a raft of ducks. And then when they're on the ground,
ridiculous.
believe it or not, it's a brace of ducks. So you got a lot of duck terms, floating around.
I told you there's a crazy vocabulary. Sean, I listened to what you said, but that one in one ear and out the other.
Did you say brace?
A brace.
A brace.
A brace of ducks.
Okay.
Like BRACE?
I think so.
Oh, good to know. Well, I'm feeling pretty good. And guys, this has been another fantastic episode of Guys Telling Stories. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the show. And if you like what you hear, you can give us a review or rate over on iTunes. And you can find us and all our social media on our website at guystellingstories.com. All right. Until next time, I'm Rich Douglas.
And I'm Bill Easton.
And I'm Sean.
All right.